Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, world. Welcome once again to Tuesday Talk with Key West Lou. I am your host, Louis Patrone. Well, it's been another interesting and exciting week. It's been a touching week, an emotionally touching week. We had the Pope here for several days, Pope Francis, and he must have touched a lot of hearts. A lot of people were out to see him, 800,000, a million people at different times. Quite a turnout, quite a reception, quite an impact I believe the man had upon us. And then the United Nations were having their annual meeting, and the heads of most nations in the world were there, Obama, Putin, everyone. And that in itself was interesting also. I want to start my talk this evening, if I may, with a little chat about Pope Francis. I believe that what a person is a boy, as a teenager, as a young person, and later in their adult years as they start to mature, all these stages in life, whatever experiences the person may have had, contribute to what the person is today. In other words, as you know, our experiences mold the person we become. So I want to share with you some experiences that Pope Francis had that I just learned about that I find quite interesting. And I don't know if they're directly related or indirectly related, but each one of them, as I relate them to you, you will appreciate had to impact the man somehow. Let's start with this. Did you know he had 3 girlfriends? His first girlfriend was the 12-year-old girl next door, Amelia. Then he had another love as a teenager. And finally, when he was in the seminary, he's 22 years old, and there was a family wedding. He went to the family wedding. He fell in love at the wedding with a young lady, and there was a bit of a courtship. He's in the seminary, and now he has that pull. Marriage or God? You know, is he going to opt for the priesthood? And ultimately, he selected the priesthood. Then there's the time that he was in college and the university. He was a chemistry student, both undergrad and graduate school. He worked at various jobs, and jobs give experience and mold and develop people. One of his jobs while he was in college, he was a janitor. He swept floors. Okay? The next one's real cool, though. He was a bouncer in an Argentine nightclub. Would you believe this kindly old man that we saw, and I say that respectfully, on television for several days, was a bouncer in a Buenos Aires nightclub. When he decided to become a priest and go to the seminary, his mother was vehemently opposed to it, extremely upset. So much so that she would not visit him for some time after he entered the seminary. Then let's talk about basketball for a moment. He's somewhat like President Obama. From the time he was a teenager till now, he likes basketball. He shoots baskets. Even today, that man in his white outfit and his white cap periodically shoots baskets. I don't know if Obama was aware of this. His favorite material acquisition is a personalized jersey from the Boston Celtics. He ultimately received his degree in chemistry and worked for a while at that before he went into the seminary. Not too long, though, because he went into the seminary at 21. He was a rebel as a young priest. He was a rebel. He hid this was a time in Argentina when he was a young priest that there was a dictator in office, and this dictator was pretty rough. He was killing people, beating people up, all those sorts of things. And our friend Pope Francis, he hid people in his church, on church property, and helped them to leave Argentina during this dictatorship. He became known as the slum landlord when he was auxiliary bishop of Buenos Aires. And the reason was his concern for the poor. He had such a great concern for the poor that he increased the number of priests assigned to the poorest areas of the city. He gave the slum areas more attention. When he finally became the Bishop of Buenos Aires, and this goes to humility, my friends. He washed the feet of people in jail, hospitals, old age homes, and slums on Holy Thursday. That's right. He washed the feet of people in jails, hospitals, old age homes, and slums on Holy Thursday, and he continues that practice now when he is Pope. He likes to dance. His favorite dance is the tango. And he, at every chance he gets, even now, he'll dance the tango when he's in a situation where it can be done. Can you see that going? The white thing, the white clothing, robes swirling around. And finally, something I came across that shows, I guess, how he thinks of God, his closeness to God. Pope Francis falls asleep while praying. In the middle of a prayer, he has this habit of falling asleep. And the Pope says, and I quote, "It is good to fall asleep in God's presence. It is good to fall asleep in God's presence." And those are some of the things that I believe have gone into the makeup of the man we know today as Pope Francis, who I think is doing dramatic things so far and is going to leave his mark upon the Catholic Church. Now, I want to stay with the Pope for a moment. I want to talk about priests who abuse children. Police abuse children too on occasion, but priests who abuse children sexually, you know what I'm talking about. We've had this scandal for going on 20 years of priests having sexual relations generally with small boys, but also with small girls on occasion. And what is happening today? And what does the Pope know and not know? Well, as it turns out, these priests are not being defrocked as they are being caught in this country now. They are not being defrocked. Those that aren't indicted, arrested, sent to jail, and that there hasn't been that many, though there have been a few, including a bishop, they are being sent to other countries to be a priest in a Catholic church. They are relocated to South America, Africa, and the Far East, South America, Paraguay, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, and Peru. And they don't know. The people in their parish don't know that these priests have this checkered background. And to me, that means that these priests, once again, have license to do wrong with young children. Well, when the Pope arrived here on his first or second day, you'll recall seeing on television, he offered his sympathy to the bishops of the United States for what they had to bear regarding the issue of priests and child abuse. And that sounded awful strange to me, because what have the bishops done? And I'm Catholic, and I followed this. Definitely. The bishops, what they did, they tried to hide this initially. Then they became businessmen, and they have to be businessmen when they run a diocese, but they were fearful of losing church assets, church money. So they fought these claims, and they had assets that they buried. They hid someplace. They did all kinds of things to avoid paying the judgments they knew would be forthcoming. Instead of saying, "We have sinned, I'm sorry, let's see what we can do to help you materially, socially, and religiously. Let's see what we can do with your soul," etc. But he congratulated the bishops for the fine job they did. There was a furor that night on television by the commentators. The next day, the Pope spoke out in favor of the abused victims. He didn't correct himself. He just said, "and all these poor kids," etc., etc. And he made the point that we had to keep them in our thoughts and under consideration. The next day, this is the next day after the next day, he met with 5 persons who had been abused by priests when they were children. And he promised these children that all such priests would be found, castigated, and thrown out of the church. Now, this is good, and I believe something like this is going to be forthcoming, more than it has ever been under the previous 2 or 3 popes. The problem, as I see it, is this. The bishops in this country, I don't think, are straight. They don't tell, or they're not truthful, I'm going to say it that way, with the Pope. I'm referring to the United States Conference of Bishops. This group is they are with the religious right. Think of the Republican Party, the ultra-conservatives in the Republican Party. The United States Conference of Bishops stand with them. Now, they do not agree. The bishops in the United States in general do not agree with Pope Francis on things like divorced members being able to receive the sacrament of Eucharist again, homosexuals, church annulments for persons who were divorced who want to remarry, et cetera, et cetera. There yesterday, he's trying to get to today with the Catholic Church. And last year they had a synod. A synod, SYNOD, is a big meeting of all the bishops. It occurs periodically, not every year, but we had one last April. And the Pope at that time said, hey, guys, this is what I want to do. We're going to do this, this, and this to move the church ahead. We're opening the windows. We're opening the doors. Let's get the fresh air in. Let's bring our people back to church because nobody goes to church anymore. Very few go to church who are Catholics anymore. Anyhow, the bishops fought him. At this meeting, publicly, the American bishops fought him. This Cardinal Dolan, who had St. Patrick in the diocese in New York City, who was host to the Pope when he was in New York this past week, is one of the leaders of this group that's adverse to him. They accused the Pope of heresy. His underlings, his bishops, accused him, the American bishops, of heresy because he wanted to take back the divorced people, the homosexuals, et cetera, et cetera. They said, no, this is wrong, it's antichrist, et cetera, et cetera. He had a hard time, and they watered down everything he wanted to do. Well, there's another synod coming up in October. Are we there yet? We're a day or two away. Towards around the 20th, 23rd of October, there's a new synod. It's going to last 8 or 9 days in Rome. This is unusual that it comes in 2 consecutive years. And the Pope's going to bring these issues up again, and he's going to bring more issues up because he's going to beat these guys. He's going to beat them in the head till they understand what he wants to do. He is no fool, Francis. Understand this, too. Pope Francis is no fool. He'll figure out how to get what he thinks is right, God's way, done with the bishops in the United States. Okay? And he's going to correct the mess that this country is in religiously as far as Catholics are concerned. And I'll show you from a practical perspective, this guy's a politician, the Pope. Since the last synod where he got beat up by his Catholic bishops, these bishops, besides, having a diocese in this country, they're big shots in the Catholic Church. They have offices they hold in Rome and the Vatican. They're big shots. They're on various big committees and all that. Over the course of the past year, the Pope has been firing them. He's been withdrawing, discharging them from these committees, from their position of authority, and replacing them with bishops from the other part of the world who support his position. Smart man. Keep an eye on this, see what happens. Planned Parenthood. Now, let me say at the outset, when these 6 or 7 videos came up, I saw each one of them. I was aghast. I was disgusted. I was disturbed. The selling of fetal tissue, the selling of body parts doesn't make sense to me. Disgusting, inappropriate, terrible, okay? I appreciate that Planned Parenthood has the right to do this, and the only money they can charge for expenses. But with the number of abortions involved, et cetera, I'd like to see the books on how much money they make off of this, because it's got to be more than just covering expenses. So, and I wrote this, and I spoke on this show, and I wrote a column on this. This is terrible, and Planned Parenthood should be taken to task. I didn't think their funding should be taken away. I thought they should be investigated and kicked in the ass. Good. But let them keep going, because overall, Planned Parenthood does good for women who have no other way of getting someone to help them with their physical and mental problems. That being said, this morning was the big congressional subcommittee meeting we've all been waiting for in Washington, 10 o'clock this morning. Miss Richards, CEO of Planned Parenthood, appeared before the appropriate subcommittee of the United States Congress, which is chaired by a Republican. Forgive me, I cannot recall his name, but I watched this. I watched this for about an hour, and here's what I've got to say about what occurred on TV. The chairman of the committee was abusive, disrespectful, shameful, gave this woman no opportunity to answer a question. Not this question or that question. I'm talking about each consecutive question. All he could say was, here's the question. Give me a quick answer. You can't? Well, I've got to move on. I haven't got the time. And he cut her off, and he cut her off, and he cut her off at each point. I was ashamed as a citizen. I'm ashamed that a fellow citizen is treated with such abuse, publicly embarrassed this way, okay? That's not the way to get at the truth. It was a kangaroo court without question as regards the Republican members. Now, again, I was opposed, and I still am opposed to what I believe Planned Parenthood did, which was wrong in this situation regarding the selling of fetal tissue and body parts. But my question now comes, two wrongs don't make a right, to the government, to the subcommittee that was sitting today. They abused a citizen. And is this what we've come down to abusing citizens in this fashion? This was bad. Try to catch on TV whatever happened. This was terrible. And I believe that Miss Richards, if she was the devil, she's entitled to respect. I mean, this is her country. She's in a public building, which is her building. She's trying to explain her position, and no one wants to hear her. They cut her off completely. They yelled at her. She deserved better. She deserved respect. And I want to make this observation. If our government, especially the Congress of the United States, I'm talking about the Republican right in the House of Representatives, keep trying and keep pushing people around, stomping them, in effect, it's not right, and they can't do it forever. And I've said this before, and I will say it again, you can't defecate on a people forever, and we are being defecated on by our government. I mean, the 1%, the 99%, income inequality, the rich get richer, the poor don't get any richer, the middle class is destroyed because our government, we know, favor the wealthy in this country and the corporations because they make the $1 million contributions to their election campaigns. But you keep this up, you keep defecating on a people, and eventually they're going to turn on those who are doing it. They may turn on certain people, they may turn on the government as a whole, because if you don't show respect, you're not going to get respect in return. And I think our government is heading for bad days if they keep this up. It just gets worse and worse with every occurrence. What I'm going to share with you now, I found very interesting, most interesting. I'm going to talk now about the unemployment rate. And believe me, it will not be boring what I am going to share with you. We're down to, I think, 5.3 now is the unemployment rate, and this is terrific. I think it's fantastic. When Obama took office, it was 11%, and now it's down to 5.3. You can't argue with the numbers. That's how I look at it, or looked at it, ED. Can't knock it. Boy, those are good numbers, 5.3. The problem is that 5.3 is not an accurate representation. Jim Gallup, CEO of Gallup Poll, wrote an interesting opinion piece back in February called, and I quote, "The Big Lie," the big lie. And basically, here's what he said. The numbers aren't right. They aren't straight. The United States government has a formula by which they calculate unemployment rates. And what I'm going to share with you is not Obama's fault, because this was done is being done under Obama, was done under Bush 2, was done under Clinton, was done under Bush 1, was done under Carter, was done under Reagan. This is the formula for doing this. I assume that all out-of-work people comprise the 5.3% that are not working. And that's really not the case. And when you think about it, there are so many people out of work, it can't be right. And here's why. Counted in who's working and isn't working are out-of-work people. Whether you're an engineer, a healthcare worker, a retail manager, or what, if you work, you're out of work as a practical matter, but you work 1 hour a week, and are paid at least $20, you mow somebody's lawn, you're not unemployed. You're considered employed. And even better, let's say that you're a high school student, farm family, and when you come home from school, you help your dad and your mother on the farm, and you work weekends on the farm. You don't get paid for this. This is donated time, family time. Families have been doing this for hundreds of years in any country. Well, you're employed, even though you don't get paid. No one even thought about you ever getting paid. If you spend at least 15 hours doing family work on the farm or any type of family work, you are employed. Or the wife, her husband has, let's say, a computer business, and one day a week she helps out in the office. Let's say she gives all of Friday. She doesn't get paid for it. She's employed. If she works 2 days, like a Friday and a Saturday, she's considered employed even though she does not get paid. Let's look at the numbers another way, and I never thought of it this way. In July of this year, July 2015, it was reported that the number of people out of work in the United States were 93,770,000. 93,777,000. Now that's a lot of people. That's just under 30% of our whole entire population. And when you think of that number, how can the unemployment rate be only 5.3%? Has to be up around 20-30%. See what I'm saying? The United States is not near at full employment as we are being told every quarter when these numbers are coming out. And again, I don't blame the president. Because they've always accepted these figures. They probably don't even know how the figures are calculated. So the 5.3% figure is not accurate, but it's the way it's been done, and probably the way it's going to continue to be. But now you and I know, and you should tell people about this, the number ain't for real because we got almost 100 million people out of work in this country. I want to talk about China for a moment. I wrote in last week's Conk Life, my weekly column, it was titled, Is the United States Ready for War? ? Is the United States ready for war? I was not concerned with ISIS. I was concerned with Russia and China. We never get to talk about China sitting out there. And today, even though Putin's out there making an ass out of Sinaitic vacations, he doesn't have the military might, except for his nuclear arsenal, to even stand up to us in the United States. We are the power militarily. But China quietly, over the last 5 years, just in that short period of time, has become a giant in the military field. Not yet competitive, but getting close to us. They have built 300 new vessels. We got 430 vessels. But most of ours are old. In fact, they're in reserve, dry dock, waiting for a time when we need them. The Chinese have built new carriers, submarines, cruisers, and they've also developed far-reaching ballistic missiles that each carries 2 warheads. These can be shot from any place at or near China and hit a city in the United States. They can go that far within 1 hour, and we have no defense to these missiles as yet. I said this, I wrote this, and I'm saying again, we don't have a defense to these yet. We haven't come up with a sophisticated system as we used to have with regard to Russia. So I said our problem's going to be someday Russia and China are going to get together. And it's starting already because Putin went into the Ukraine. That's 2 years ago. The free world basically sanctioned him and has cut off his testicles. Russia's testicles have been cut off economically. This hasn't stopped Putin. In the meantime, while this is going on, he makes a deal with China to develop 3 different oil sources in China. Russia's going to develop 3 different oil sources in China. He also makes a deal to build 2 railroads in China, going from Europe to China, and the oil is going to be transferred from China to Russia and back to China and so forth. And they're getting tight. They're getting tight. And so is this going to happen? Okay. Well, here's what gives me some concern. Syria is the issue today. Putin surprises the United Nations over the weekend and says, I have a plan to solve the Syrian problem. We're going to support Assad. Now, the United States is against Assad continuing in office. Iran and Russia, and I don't know if he mentioned China. I believe he did. We're going to get together and we're going to support Assad. And the United States doesn't. Now, because they believe this is the way to get rid of ISIS. You get rid of Assad, you can't get rid of ISIS. ISIS will replace Assad. The president said no to Assad, but my feeling is over the next couple of weeks there's going to be a compromise and we are going to temporarily support Assad. In the meantime, it is announced today by Israel, and they know what's going on every place. You have to give them credit, that a Chinese carrier and a guided missile cruiser are already docked at the Syrian port of Tartus, Tartas. They have the Chinese carrier and guided missile cruiser docked in Tartus. And it was reported about 2 days ago that we know there are Russian Marines in Syria and that the Chinese were going to send soldiers, army, to Syria to assist the Russian Marines. So I talked about it. It seems to be happening, and I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm right, you see the development of a dangerous situation here, bad. And what I thought was going to happen, and I'm no expert on these things, I read, I hear, I listen, I watch, and I see something, and I put it on paper. If it holds up in the way I research, I put it on paper. The Chinese and Russia are going to be buddies, even though President Obama entertained Jinping, the president of China last week, at the White House. Big dinner, okay? It's going to happen, though, I'm afraid. Which now brings me to, very quickly, Venezuela. They have a president, okay? Nicolas Maduro. He is the worst thing in the world. I've been knocking this guy for 3 years. He took over his country. They don't have toilet paper. They have had a shortage of toilet paper for 3 years now. They have food shortages and everything else. He's turned into another Fidel Castro. He goes on television and he tells his people, the Americans are going to invade us. We have to stand together, etc. That's why we don't have food. That's why we don't have toilet paper. Anyhow, my point I want to make, because the show's coming to a close here, is he's getting 12 big-time jet fighters from Russia, and I don't know what he's going to do with them. He hasn't got much of an army, but he's going to use them to threaten us. And at the same time, Putin is going to say, see, America, United States, I screwed you again. I made an ass out of you. I sold jets to Venezuela. Okay, my friends, that's the show for this week. Hope you have enjoyed. The show is archived on Blog Talk Radio and YouTube. It's also linked to my website, Key West Lou. I wrote a book, The World Upside Down. If you like this show, buy my book. If you don't like this show, don't buy my book. The book's available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Thank you for joining me again this week. I look forward to being with you next week.